So towards the end of last year, I picked up this guitar at auction. Now, I think one of the most searched jazz guitar towns is probably cheaper alternatives to Gibson L5. And this is one of those guitars that, looks like an L5 and is considered as one of those kind of cheaper alternatives, because L5s have gone very silly in terms of the price in the last few years. And for using guitars out live, one thing I've always liked the idea of is having a backup guitar to my main instrument, which is a Gibson Super 5, which shares combinations of both the L5 and the Gibson Super 400. And I always wanted to get something that looks fairly similar and hopefully feels and sounds similar too. Now, I'm really happy with the price I paid for it at auction, but does it stack up for what I want it for? Now, let me know what you think of it in terms of the tone and appearance. I'm going to play for you a little rendition I've just chucked together in one take, warts and all, of the tune No Moon at All, which is heavily inspired by the Julie London and Barney Kessel version. So there the guitar was providing both the rhythm and the lead. The rhythm was actually through my Quilter Tone Block 202 amplifier, whereas the lead was through my Tone King Imperial Mark II. And in terms of strings, I'm using Tomastic Round Wounds 13s. So a bit more about the model. This is an Epiphone Emperor. This is from 1983 and it is made in Japan. Later on, production would shift to certainly Korea and then I think China. I think the actual model, the original Epiphone Emperor, actually dates back to 1935, but naturally there's been many changes over the years. With this particular model being from 1983, this achieves my goal of wanting, for some reason, to own a birthier guitar. And I'd love to know in the comments if that's something you've already done or would like to do. Now, it was made at the Matsumuko, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, factory in Japan, which, according to forums and, guitar chat online, that guitars of that era from the 80s and from that factory, they're highly regarded. You know, there's that dip in the quality from US guitars, supposedly, where Japan and Asian guitars took over in terms of quality. Obviously, it's all subjective. You can't believe everything you read on forums, but it is a widely held view. It is very similar in appearance to an L5. We have got, you can see, binding, the triple binding all around the edges. We've got bound F-holes. We've got 2 humbuckers like a Gibson L5 CES. We have the same style bridge kind of decoration, and then the end of the fingerboard here, classic L5 look, and that lovely binding that you get at the edge of the fretboard as well. The fretboard itself is ebony like you'd get on an L5, and we've got these lovely mother of pearl, I think, inlays. And the big difference though is this Epiphone headstock. Obviously on the L5 you have the flower pot, and the headstock's obviously a slightly different shape. And then we've got the Epiphone Tree of Life, which I first had on an Epiphone Sheraton many years ago, and I've always quite liked. I think it's quite a nice decorative touch. One big difference, we have the trapeze tailpiece rather than the L5 tailpiece, obviously. I have seen some people swap that out for one. I think that's a bit cheeky, but I suppose it could be done. I actually changed the volume and tone controls to the witch hat ones, which I quite like the look of. I think it complements the guitar well. We've got 2 humbuckers, and it's in this lovely tobacco sunburst, which I think is really fetching. I'll just show you the sides and the back. Particularly nice. In terms of looks, it's very similar to an L5. It's very light as well as a guitar, which I quite like. One thing that is noticeably different, I feel like the neck is a bit fuller. And one thing I found, I've gigged this guitar once, is I find I'm not as comfortable on the first few positions. Once I get to sort of fret 4, 5 and onwards, it feels fine. But just down here, for some reason, compared to my Super 5, I don't feel quite at home just yet. So the jury's out for me for a little while on this guitar before I decide whether to keep it. Now, a massive question I had about this guitar was whether it had a solid top. Now, this guitar online is often sold and described as having a solid top. And I just think for the price, I just can't believe that would be possible. And when I had it, bought it at auction, it was in a bit of a state. The pickups weren't working. There was something wrong electronically, and it also just needed some TLC. It clearly been sat in a case for many years. So I gave it to a luthier to give it a proper go over, and I did say to him, right, can you check if it's got a solid top? Can you take the pickups out? And he sent me a picture and quickly confirmed it's a laminate top. So this begs the question, did someone just say that at some point and then everyone's gone, oh yeah, they've got solid tops? Or do some of these models have solid tops? Maybe they started out with solid tops and moved to laminate. I'm not sure. I just think I really would not trust an internet listing for guitars in this price range when it says about solid laminate tops. I think it's probably unlikely and kind of wishful thinking. And quite often when guitars are listed online, people just copy other people's spec, and they might just go, oh yeah, it's got a solid top. We'll make it easier to sell. There's nothing wrong with a laminate top, of course. Some of the greatest jazz guitar ever recorded was recorded with, laminate top guitars. It's just kind of, for me, I tend to find I prefer the overall depth of tone you get from a solid top. So a big question, does this stack up against my main guitar, my Gibson Super 5? It gets pretty close. I would say it gets 80% of the way there. I think an audience member at a gig would be none the wiser that I was using this, but I would know. And I tell you, playability wise, I'd say just this is personal to me, I'm just so used to the neck on my Gibson Super 5 that this just is going to take a bit of getting used to. It's easy to play, but it's just, say, down here for me, I'm just feeling not quite yet at home, but that might change. Now, I'll have to make a video in future comparing it to my Super 5, but just to say my impressions are, having gigged it, practiced on it, taken it to rehearsals and things like that, it sounds very, very good, but it has not got the richness of my Super 5. It's kind of like really nice tone, but it's just missing that sort of bit of richness and depth that you get from, I think, the solid top. And when I played it at a gig, one of my fellow bandmates commented that he thought the lead tone was pretty damn close, but the rhythm guitar work didn't sound quite as good as the Super 5, which maybe I just need to get used to dialing in the EQ a bit more though. So would I recommend this model as a cheaper alternative to a Gibson L5? I think these made in Japan Epiphones, there's lovely casinos and Sheratons they made back then as well. They're highly revered, and I found my experience of this guitar to be very positive so far. The workmanship on it's very good. Overall, happy with the tone. And say, is it as good as my Super 5? No, but it's still a very, very good guitar. If you were looking at the Emperor model, just remember there's, different production, made in Japan, certainly Korea, and I think China as well, as I said earlier. So, obviously that's going to have a big difference to what that guitar's like. And naturally, if you can, and I wasn't able to do it myself with this one, you want to try and play a guitar before purchasing it. Now, naturally, I need to make a video where I directly compare this to the Super 5, so we can compare the tones, and you can decide for yourself whether I'm right about the fact this gets to sort of 80% of the tone of that. But I just wanted, thought this guitar deserved a video of its own first, because I think, it's a really, really lovely sunburst. I love ebony fretboards, I can't, personally for me, it's the best fretboard material. So smooth, and I am a sucker for ornate kind of appointments. I really personally don't like really plain looking guitars, that's just me. I know these things necessarily don't help us play, but I think they're beautiful things to look at as well, and this certainly does that. I'll be very happy using this on stage again, and it might be nicer sometimes, for some gigs I do, to take something like this rather than the Super 5. But let me know what you think in the comments, or if you've got direct experience of this particular model.